Thing.
Yeah, John, you sound great. So, John Weir, welcome to Ranching Reboot. How are you today?
I am good, Brian. How are you doing?
I'm doing outstanding. It's well, I'm doing. I guess I'm doing pretty good, all things considered. Like a lot of the rest of us, I could use a rain,
Yep.
very, very desperately. But we can talk about drought later. Let's talk about John Weir. So, before we get into it, I've known you for years. I know where you're at, and I know what you've been doing. So, why don't you give our listeners a little bit of a taste of who you are and where you're at?
Well, my name is John Weir. I'm associate extension specialist here at the Natural Resource Ecology and Management Department at Oklahoma State University. I've been at OSU for 32 years now. I spent the first 16 years of my time here running the OSU Research Range, a research ranch out west of Stillwater. Then when the Natural Resource Ecology and Management Department was formed, I was asked to join the faculty there, and I've been here ever since. So doing that, I teach classes, I do research on fire ecology, fire effects, patch burning, all the deal, and then extension duties as well. I guess I am the extension prescribed fire ecologist here for Oklahoma and the Southern Great Plains. I like to say, a lot of times I say I'm the extension specialist for Kansas, Texas, and Nebraska a lot. So
I'd be happy to claim you. I'd be happy to claim you because Kansas State does not really recognize what goes on in the Red Hills.
Yeah. Doing that, I grew up here in Oklahoma. So I'm grew up in Southwest Oklahoma, and went to school at Cameron down at Lawton, and then went to Texas Tech for a couple of years, got my master's, and got to come back here to Oklahoma and been here working at OSU ever since.
32 years, you said.
32 years. Yeah, it don't seem like that. I don't look a year over 50.
Well, it takes a long time. I'm thinking here that, that's 32 years history of working, with plots of land like your research plots. That's a long enough timeline to actually see what works in a long term.
It does, and that's a thing, a bunch of us have talked about, and if you look at a lot of the fire research stuff that gets published and goes on, it's a lot of it's short-term stuff. It's like 2-year study, somebody working on a master's, or 2 to 4 year studies looking at post-fire stuff. And, we don't see, a lot of times you don't see those impacts or effects, or you report a negative. And really and truly, if you look at it in the long run, it's a positive, but nobody's, they don't look at, a lot of times it doesn't get looked at in the long run. You see a lot of that, I think, with a lot of the wildfire studies, especially where people looking at impacts of wildfires and stuff, especially out west, all they report is a negative immediate impacts that may be negative looking, but the long-term impacts are huge, and what most of them are well positive on that.
So one of the things that, you're the fire guy. Like, in my mind, if I think about fire in the Great Plains and I have a question I can't answer, you're the first guy I'm probably going to turn to.
Well, I appreciate that.
And we can talk a little bit about, let's jump right into some of your research. Let's talk about some patch burning research and what you've learned about patch burning. And then we can maybe kind of segue into, timing of burns, burn frequency, and historical fire frequency. Like, I don't think we need to talk about how to actually do a burn, because workshops are great places to do that.
Yep.
And I want to talk about prescribed burn associations today too. So, can you lead us off with some of your patch burning research?
Okay. Yeah. Again, we've been working, again with Sam Fullendorf since 1999. We started the patch burn study here at west of Stillwater, there at the research range where I was running it at the time, and we started implementing it back in 1999. So that's stuff, man, it's hard to believe that stuff been going on for 23 years out there. It kind of puts it into perspective. We've gone back. I guess we burned through those patches like 6 times now, 7 times now. We're on our fixing to be on our 8th rotation through there. That makes you feel old. It's like, golly, I've been doing this a long time, but it makes it important. So yeah, we started working on that, and that work is spread out all over the US and Canada, international, it's gone really good. And, the patch burn stuff was, initially started to look at impacts of that and fire and grazing, trying to mimic a little bit of the historical use of the lands, especially the Great Plains, where we had buffalo, large herbivores, and even medium-sized herbivores that used to roam around, and how they utilize fire and would follow fire and the importance of fire and what all it could do. And we've looked at all the aspects of that with that patch burning, and it's just been a pretty incredible process. And patch burning is just a pretty incredible process to get implemented. There's just so many benefits. A lot of times we tried to look at it, tried to keep an open mind and not say, well, this is the end all cure all. We were kind of tried to be as negative as we could be, but a lot of times, man, you just couldn't find many negatives about it. Because again, we've looked at soils and about nutrient quality of soils and plants and things. Man, you just keep seeing benefits, and then weight gains on livestock and benefits to wildlife species, different ones, because again, you're varying all the habitats out there by patch burning, not burning the entire landscape, all at the same time and same season and things like that. And then the impacts that grazing has on those plant communities, and what it does, and and how it works to me, it's definitely it's a drought. It's kind of some drought insurance, one of the deals, because again, you don't burn the entire place, you're burning just certain areas every year, and you're stockpiling fuel, but it's also forage for those times that when it gets tough, we're doing that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we should define patch burning a little bit better.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know if there is a really great, again, definition, because there's, we try to also keep it where there's not just one specific thing, but what I define it as is where you take and you burn a portion of a area, and then you're going to rotate that burn area around that unit over time. And the amount of time between burns is going to be goals and objective oriented to what your goals and objectives are, possibly what is, kind of maybe a historic fire frequency for your region. Because as we move further west, when we get less rainfall, it takes a little more time for things to recover. We're going to have a little longer interval between fires that we're going to have. And so, to me, there's really no set definition of patch size. What is a patch size? It's, it just depends on what you want to do and how you want to do it. I know people that want to do small patches, a bunch of small patches. I guess you could say, example would be, I'm going to burn a third of this place every year, and we're going to rotate that every year, a third of it the next year, and next year we're going to burn another different third of it. Some people burn that whole third as one chunk. That's, we're going to get this one chunk burned as 1/3. Other people will say, well, I'm going to break that third up into 10 different burn units scattered around the area. There's no wrong answer. There's no right answer. It just depends on goals and objectives of what people want to do.
So there's not really, it's not a size thing. It's not a percentage or a fraction thing of a ranch. It's just whatever works for you, kind of in a rotation to keep things fresh and keep things reset.
And that's that's the main thing with patch burning. It's to constantly keep fire on the land every year, and to keep fresh, forage for livestock production is what you're interested in. Also to keep those habitats for different wildlife species that require certain different habitats, again, it moves them, and it doesn't. And that's the thing, because a lot of people have always had, fires that have gone through their property from some kind of source. And they always complained about, oh, you can't just burn a part of it because the livestock, the cattle will camp on it, and it turns into a weed patch, and it just stays that way, and it'll stay that way for years. And the main reason is there's nothing else that gets burned after that. And so, yes, they're going to go back to that same spot year after year because it's grazed short. That's what they want to be in, is short, short statured grass, and forbs and stuff. They want to keep it down short. That's where they're going to camp at, and they're going to camp until something else gets burned, or you fence that. The historic way to manage that was you either destock the whole pasture until it grew back enough, or you fence that, to put temporary fencing up, patch, cut that patch off that didn't burn and give it time to get up even, so you don't have that, to keep that uniform grazing across the land, and on doing that. And so, that's totally opposite of what patch burning is. But patch burning isn't static. You don't have that one fire and then that's all you get. You get multiple fires. You can either have multiple fires within a year, but the biggest deal is you're burning every year and moving that patch and moving that grazing intensity, that focal grazing point within that. And that's what moves it. And again, then once that happens, they focus their grazing. Again, from our work that we've done, they're going to spend 70% of their time on those recently burned patches.
Yep.
That's what they want. And you've seen it. You see it all the time with that. Given a choice, that's what they're going to do. Like Sam always says, if cows had matches, they would burn something every day.
Yeah.
That way they could come back. They'd have something fresh all the time. They would. Because that's what. And again, it doesn't have to be livestock. There's all kinds of work's been done worldwide. Showing all kinds of species of animals congregate to fire, to freshly burned areas. And again, there are species that require long periods of time. There's certain ground nesting birds and stuff that require heavy buildup of fuel, 24, 36 months post fire. That's their habitat, and so you can create that with patch burning where you can't with a uniform burn that covers the whole landscape or the whole burn unit. But by breaking that up into smaller burn units and burning them separately and then rotating that fire by years along that landscape or along that burn unit.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So let's talk a little bit about historical fire frequency. And I know that your research covers the whole Great Plains, east, west, north to south, and there's going to be different fire return intervals for different environments. Can you make some generalizations about historical fire frequency on the plains?
From work that we've done, and again, you look at there's several great maps and works that different people have done trying to recreate again what a historical fire frequency is and stuff. And probably my favorite is the folks Rich Guyette and the folks out Mike Stambaugh and the folks out of the University of Missouri. They in 2012 they published a great map, and part of it is because they looked at fire scar data, because again they run a tree ring lab there at University of Missouri, and that was a problem a lot of times too, is there wasn't a lot of trees on the Great Plains, so you can't get fire scar data because there was no trees. But along the peripheries and the edges, they worked on that. But also they looked at climate, at rainfall patterns. Again, as you in the Great Plains, as you go west, rainfall decreases and things like that. And probably their biggest thing, and that's what I really and truly think about when I think about fire frequency or fire return interval or how often someplace burned, is I look at it this way: is how quickly or how long does it take for the fuel that you're using to burn to recover?
Okay.
And so we've got there's areas, especially in the eastern part of the Great Plains. You look at the Flint Hills, burns annually.
I would argue that burning annually in the Flint Hills, I question if that's the best thing long term for the soil, for the ecology.
Right. But I'm looking at fire returnable. So you've got fuel loads that are able to recover that quick, and if you look at some of their maps and things, a lot of them were about 2 to 3 years. Again, as you go west, it opens up a little bit, but we're talking about most all the Great Plains, again, of Oklahoma, Kansas, southern part Texas, they're showing anywhere 2 to 4 year fire return interval historically. And if you think about it, how quickly does it recover and will it burn again? Again, a lot of times it depends on the weather, but that's the other thing we got to remember. When you look at, we're humans and we always want these numbers and we want something hard. So a lot of times people say, well, burn on a 3-year fire return interval. So what that means is we're going to burn every 3 years. Well, if you look at it, it says, well, historically, that's what it was. Well, if you look how they derive that is, again, they look at a fire scar and look at historical, it shows where it's at. And so you take that, and so let's say a 30-year period. So this tree in a 30-year period, there was 10 fires in that 30-year period. And 10 divided by, or 30 divided by 10 is 3. But if you look at the actual map or the actual scars, it'll show, well, year 1 it burned, year 2 it burned, then it didn't burn again to year 7, then it burned year 15 and 16, then it burned year 19, and then burned year 25 and 28, up to 10. So there's 10, but it didn't burn every 3 years like we think that's what it is. Some years it burned back to back. Some years it was 10 years between fires on that. But the biggest thing to me is when you're putting fire back on the land, which that's what most people are doing because fire has been excluded for so long. We need to go in as often as we can early on to reclaim that land, because that's what most burns. New people that are burning are getting going, we call reclamation burn. You've got maintenance burns and reclamation burns. Yep. And a reclamation burn is one that we're trying to reclaim that land and get it back to what we want.
So what are we trying to reclaim it from?
Well, again, that goes back to goals and objectives. A lot of times, but we are trying to reclaim it from woody plant encroachment. Typically, where we're at, cedars and other woodies that are taken over and have displaced different species and things like that are out there. And so trying to reclaim that, then again, those burns are always the most difficult because a lot of times we're dealing with volatile fuels, heavy woody fuels. We don't have as much fine fuel because the woody plants have displaced a lot of the forage production or fuel production, whichever you want to look at it. And so it takes drier conditions, windier conditions, a little more extreme conditions under the burn window to get it done. And so that it ups our risk a little bit. And then, but once we get it to where we want it, we start those maintenance burns where we can reduce the fire return interval because it's not as important. It's important to keep the fire return interval there to keep them from ever coming back. But we don't have to say, all right, we got to burn every 3 years or this isn't going to happen. We can do that. We can burn under conditions that are safer, less risk involved, higher humidities, lower wind speeds, things like that. And that burns a whole lot simpler and a whole lot safer to do on that. So there's always big differences kind of in fire types.
So that kind of gave me a good opening to talk about seasonality and timing of fire. Yeah. Traditionally here on the Great Plains, we think of late winter, early spring as the time to burn, like the very end of the dormant season. If you've got and my benchmark is I watch winter moisture. If I've had a really dry winter, that tells me I should not burn because that indicates we could be going into a drought. And that's also that's why it's a good time to burn, because you're coming out of what, I like to call the winter drought a lot. I average maybe 4 or 5 inches of precipitation during the winter. So my fine fuels are going to be dry. My medium and my heavy fuels are going to be drier. Mm-hmm. And those late spring or those late winter, early spring burns, we've had great success over the last well, Dad's been burning out here on the ranch, I think, since 1986. And somewhere around then is when I got handed my first drip torch and told, walk that line.
Go that way.
Yeah, go that way. Like, oh, okay, this is cool. Hey, there's fire behind me.
Be sure and stop when you get to the fence.
Yeah. I think somebody was down at the other end to get me shut down, and I didn't go wandering off.
Catch that boy, don't let him go any further.
Take his matches away. But lately we've started doing a lot of burns in the summer. I guess not a lot. We've been trying to get as many done as we can, but there's some different challenges in burning in the summer. Can you talk a little bit about seasonality of burning and how that can be used to accomplish different goals?
Yeah, I'll kind of go back to where you started at. Again, you're right. That's the traditional burn season in the Great Plains is that late winter, early spring. It depends on where you are, south to north relationship on when you really start. In Texas, early spring is, late winter is February. In a lot of Oklahoma, a lot of our folks, they start burning in February. And as you go to the northern part of the state, then it's kind of a March time frame, and even some of the April. When you get into Nebraska, the folks up there, they're late April, first part of May. Sometimes they'll burn earlier. Again, they're getting to do that. But you were right in doing that. A lot of that has been focused around livestock production, because again, we're coming out of the dormant season. Things are dry. It'll burn good, but it's also going to green up quickly, and so we're going to dump cattle on there, and that's what we're doing it for. And doing that. And so, but also, just like you said, we are coming out of the driest time of the year, or the driest season in especially the southern Great Plains, is December, January, and February, and March. Those or at least December, January, February are the three driest months, especially in Oklahoma. That's the three driest months of the year. Again, we can probably look at it in Kansas the same way.
I'm close enough that I count.
Yeah, that's the driest time of year. Also, our weather patterns are set up where we're getting all these dry cold fronts that come from the northwest, and even from straight north from the Arctic. And typically, you look at it, man. We get a lot of times we can get single-digit humidities. Again, it's dry. It makes burning really difficult. Also, at that time, we start to see a lot of burn bans get slapped on. People trying to burn around burn bans, burn through burn bans. Man, you get a lot of consternation between fire departments and landowners, and it's just but that's, again, we still try to burn that, and then we go back and throw March in the mix, where a lot of burning gets done in March, especially Kansas South. March is the windiest month of the year.
That's horrible.
I know it is. It's looking at from work I've done looking at timing of burns. March is the worst month, has the least amount of days and times to get burns done, but that's when most everybody wants to try to burn. And so it makes things really difficult to do that. And so, that gets to be the problem with having one single season that we burn under, have a burn season, and, and say, all right, our burn season is February through April. Again, that's 3 months. We ought to be able to get it done. But how many burn units do you have to get done? What's the weather pattern? What's things going on within that? A lot of times it gets limited. Then what happens when you don't get a burn done?
It backs up to next year.
It backs up, and you do it for the next year. And by doing that, again, some people possibly destock, or they rest a pasture to give it enough fuel to burn or do that. And then you go, well, I can't do that again for another year. I mean, it's just totally going to throw my whole planning and my management strategies off. And so, man, it just starts to mix up. And then pretty soon, after a couple of years, it gets compounded. You're not getting half the stuff burned because you're trying to play catch up every year. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to open that burn window up to where it's a bigger and broader one. And I always like to tell people, a lot of times people ask me, goes, well, when's your burn season? I said, well, we try to start around January 1, try to start as early as we can. And then we'll usually try to get done about midnight on December 31st, so year round.
Yeah, fair enough.
Is a burn season. Again, a lot of it depends on goals, objectives. That's your, what's your goals and objectives. But if my goal is to mainly burn, and again, for woody plant control, for livestock production like that, wildlife even, burning year round, then there's all kinds of benefits and stuff that we can pop up and show with that. And so then let's start burning in that growing season and open it up. And a lot of times that, those growing season burns, you've done enough of them, they're a whole lot safer and they're a whole lot easier, on the average, because we are a whole lot more humid in the summer months because you have more moisture getting pumped in. We got southerly flow from the Gulf of Mexico. We get a little more, relative humidities are typically higher. We have green growing grass and plants out there. They're transpiring moisture into the atmosphere, which increases relative humidity. Everybody talks about, oh, summer is hot and dry. Well, but summer is also very wet, wettest time of the year. May, June, July, typically, again, is our, April, May, June. July starts to slow down in a lot of regions. We start to see a little less rainfall, but again, we get way more rainfall from April to September than we do from October through March, And so it's the typically whatever typical is in the Southern Great Plains is that's typically our wettest time of the year. And so we have way more humidity. It's a whole lot safer to burn. You're burning a lot of green fuels that are out there. So that lowers the intensity of the fire. It slows it down, makes it safer, makes it easier and doing that. And again, we've been doing a lot of that work for, almost 20 years. It's been great. The biggest thing, that makes you feel good and to see that is just like what you talked about. We're starting to see a lot more landowners actually from stuff that we've been collecting. Right now, about 20% of the burning that's going on is burnt during the growing season now. So we've actually, it's actually changed a lot of mindsets. And you talk to people and, they're able to get more fire on the ground because they don't limit themselves to one season of the year.
Right. I think I figured up once during the 6 weeks of March and the first 2 weeks of April, which is traditionally our burning season here in the Red Hills. There's years that there's 3 days. There's years where there's 15, but there's very, very rarely more than 15 good days to burn in those 6 weeks. I can take a look at the chunk of time from June 15th to September 1st, which would be my season to do summer burns to meet management goals. And there's like 60 some plus days in there. I would much rather, all things being equal, if I'm going to burn on a day that is 80 degrees, I would much rather do it in July when the wind is 7 miles an hour than do it in March when the wind is 17 and right on that hairy edge of safety.
And you're probably dealing with low 30s on humidities or even less. Whereas at summertime, you're probably dealing at a low, maybe 40% RH. And a lot of green fuel, green fuels out there that slows that fire intensity down and slows the rate of spread down, still gets the things accomplished and doing that. Yeah. Again, should we burn everything in the summer? No, it's different seasons. Again, it goes back to goals and objectives, but also, there's importance for summer burns. There's importance of spring burns. There's importance of burning in the fall. It's all there. It all has benefits, all has pluses, all has negatives,
So we were talking about, fire return interval and historical fire frequency. And I think about a lot of the fires that are started, quote, in the dormant season that we've seen. Let's just take the last 6 years of history from Anderson Creek wildfire to now.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, now I'm not a researcher, so I haven't collected all this data. This is just anecdotal from what I remember reading, is almost every fire that we've had during the dormant season, when it's been really dry, when it's cold, can be traced back to a human source, whether it's, chains on a road, power lines slapping together, pickup backfiring going down the highway. Most of those are traced back to a human source. So the question is, when could nature light fires on the Great Plains? And we can have a thunder snow in October, so there could be lightning in October. I get that, but how likely would February, December, February, March fires have been?
Probably, again, through lightning sources, again, through natural, whatever you want to call, if you want to call it natural, which would be lightning, to me, lightning, volcanoes, that's naturally occurring fire. We don't have many volcanoes to deal with. So lightning, doing that. But if you look at it historically, again, when do most of our thunderstorms occur? And, that will be that spring period into early summer. And then, again, we can, like you said, we can have thunderstorms year round. But the deal is, lightning always, a lot of times people look at lightning as the source of what was the original fire and what shaped the landscape. And that's, to me, I'm not a big proponent of that. And there's a lot of people that don't. To me, humans are the fire starters and the fire source. You look back historically and you look back now. Humans will always manage and shape the land they live on to make life easier, simpler, to make them money, to do whatever. So again, Native Americans burned because they saw the benefits of fire for attracting game, to make it easier to hunt. For their, when they got horses, they wanted to graze on those kind of areas. Travel corridors. So when we traveled from winter campgrounds to summer campgrounds, we want to make it easy to get through there. We don't have to fight all this trees and brush, trying to get everything through there. We want to make it easy. Again, that's why we build roads. But they didn't have that option. They used fire. Also, they didn't, the warring tribes would, could ambush you easily in those densely forested areas or densely areas with dense cover. So you didn't want to travel. So we burned things, Native Americans burned all that. Because if you think about lightning and what it is, what is lightning always accompanied by?
Usually rain.
Usually, either rainfall or high RHs. And that typically puts fires out. Again, it's the same thing. How many lightning fires do you really see annually or even in a decade out there? And again, granted, a lot of times we're on top of them and we put them out pretty quickly because, again, we've got, doing that. I'm not saying that lightning didn't burn. I mean, I can see historically, yeah, lightning occurred, dry conditions, not much rain. And yeah, it burned a big chunk of ground. But for the most part, on average and stuff, most lightning fires and stuff, pretty limited. I think they were pretty limited in what their scope and their scale was and their importance. The human set fires, the Native American fires, those are the ones that shaped the Great Plains, shaped the nation, shaped the world. You can follow fire all around the world. Native people have always burned the landscapes that they live in because of, again, the benefits that they saw from it, derived from it, not only for everyday life, but also for safety and things like that. They use that.
Only tool in the toolbox. That's what you're going to pull out.
I mean, it is. Again, you can't, they didn't have no shredders. They didn't have no chainsaws. They didn't have bulldozers or anything like that. Fire was it. That's what they had.
Yeah, they didn't even really have a Bic lighter. Two rocks to beat together and a stick on fire.
Yeah, or carry some kind of pot with coals in it to the next spot, use them to start a fire, all kinds of things. And I've said a lot too that I think Hollywood did a really bad job of portraying Native Americans as, just savages that didn't know anything. You look at the historical accounts, they knew fire. They knew when to burn it. There's some great stuff that's been, some books that are out there about historical fire stuff and about, reasons that they burned. They had it down to, there's a great account of some tribes in California that were really big into basket weaving. And so they used rushes and sedges and wetlands to weave their basket with. Well, they learned that if they burned those areas and then come in after things regrew, those made baskets that were stronger, lasted longer and things than if you used old growth rushes and sedges. We used fire, make it, arrow making. They did it all the way down to, again, some of the shrubs or trees that they used to make arrows from, that if they burned it off, top killed it, then it would resprout, and the resprouts would grow long and straight, so make great arrows. If you didn't do that, you got gnarly, twisted, old growth that you couldn't make a good arrow out of. So even just down to the small details, they had it down with fire. Pretty interesting.
Okay. Your comment about how many fires did lightning start in the last decade, just on my ranch in the last 5 years, there's been 3.
Uh-huh.
One of them was actually this past summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much rain fell that day, but it was just enough to put out the fire, because the lightning bolt hit one of my fence posts on top of a hill, one of my fiberglass fence posts. It melted the clip off and vaporized about 50 yards of wire. and that was it. I just said, and then there was a spot there that was burned. I haven't been back there in a couple of weeks.
We were actually burning one of our patches. It's probably been about 6-7 years ago on one of our places. And it was a summer burn, and we were burning along. We were about to get the backfire totally finished. And I come up in there and I looked at the cedar, and it was kind of brown at the bottom, kind of like, I said, we haven't burned here in 3 years. Why is that brown? And then I got to looking, and there was an area around that cedar tree that had regrown, but it wasn't quite as tall as everything out there. And it wouldn't burn. And I got looking at it, and then I looked at the cedar, and there was a crack in the bark and all that. It got struck by lightning, and it burned an area that was maybe, I don't even think it burned 1/4 of an acre around that cedar. But the rain had put it out. We never had a clue that thing even had started out there. And there's a lot of that, I think, that goes on. On small scale.
Yeah. So let's shift gears and talk about the threat of woody encroachment on the plains.
It's there, isn't it?
Oh man. We can kind of dive off into the rangeland analysis platform. I've talked about it a little bit on the show, and it's not, I don't want to say that it isn't user friendly, because it is.
Yeah.
But you kind of got to know what you're looking for or what you're looking at. And I know that's not necessarily your wheelhouse. And I'm trying to get Direct Twidwell to return email so I can get him on the show to talk about RAP and its role. So maybe could you give us just a brief background on Rangelands Analysis Platform, and then tell us how you use it?
I haven't used it a lot, but again, I've been on it and looked at it. And then it's a great tool. They're getting more and more. I know Laura Goodman just told me yesterday they'd got it up and running now, that you can look at forage loss by county due to woody encroachment pretty much throughout all the Great Plains, looking at all that. And that's scary to see how much forage by county that we're actually losing. You could do that for your own ranch. You can go on and outline that. So again, you can look at productivity. They've got that new part of it where you can get, they're estimating current production for the past 16 days. So you can kind of look at that and see where that production lies within there. You can flip it to bare ground, shrub cover, tree cover, for specific areas, large areas. And it's really, there's just a lot of, there's so many things you can do with it and look at it. A lot of it's just spending some time on there and doing that. It is user friendly to a point. I think part of it is there's just so much stuff you can do with it. You don't know where to start. I think that's a big part of it, because it's pretty.
And then what do you do with all the information?
Yeah. And then what do you do with all it? Yeah, a lot of it is to look at it and say, hey, I'm getting way behind the 8 ball here because of woody plant encroachment, and this is, this is where it's at, and this is what I've got. That's a big part of it. And I see that there's a lot of people using that to start mapping things, especially on watershed scales or, more landscape scales and stuff. But again, it's still even great for an individual, looking at your own properties and things like that.
My favorite thing to do with it is take like the oldest series that they have, the oldest data they have, to show the tree cover in the Great Plains.
Yep.
And then the newest one.
Oh, I know it.
Oh, you get people's attention with that.
Real quick. And then if again, and like I said, if they're producers, livestock producers, you flip that over and look at total forage production over that same time scale and go, it went from there. And usually it's at half of what it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's half. You've lost half of what you got, and the sad thing is a lot of people have not changed the stocking rate since then. It's like, well, grandpa run 30 head on this place, I can do the same thing. Well, grandpa didn't have 30+% cedar cover out here and woody plants, and then you haven't changed the stocking rate. There's no way you're going to get a fire to go anyway, because it looks like a tile floor out there.
Pool table covered with cedar trees. Can you relate percent canopy cover of cedar trees to forage production loss?
Yes, you can. Dave Engel did a bunch of great work on that early in the 90s and stuff on that, and showing that, the production, he had some, I'm trying to go off the top of my head, but had some great numbers that like 400 trees per acre, which 400 trees per acre kind of depends on size, but these were all small trees and baiting. You already were down to about half of forage production within that. So you start looking at cover. Again, you think at 50% cover stuff. 50% cover is a lot of times people will look at 50% cover and say, "Oh, that thing's totally covered with cedar." Well, it's not, but it darn sure looks like it. And again, you definitely have lost 50% of that ground cover, so again, as that number starts to increase, your production starts to decline, and then it's going to get that point where they meet and then they just fall off, in doing that.
And then we're left with an eastern red cedar forest.
That's right. And, and again, it's, what's that really good for,
Well, I mean, so we can play that game. I mean, some of the environmentalists, they love to say trees are good, cows are bad. Trees are good, cows are bad. But I think in this case, there's a lot of nuance, because if we let the eastern red cedars take over the plains, which they're winning the war.
They're winning right now, for sure.
We're not even making a dent in it right now.
No.
But if we let the cedars win, it's going to continue to desertify, get dry, get dusty, and erode. And it's also like the destruction of, major economic activity.
Right. Right.
And it's not just, it's destroying the production. It's not just taking away from the production of the land, by the trees taking moisture, taking land space area, and reducing the overall health and productivity. It's also reducing habitat for a lot of other wildlife.
And then let's just even think about human health. So allergy and asthma with cedar pollen. Used to 30 years ago, here in Oklahoma, we'd have, typical south winds, prevailing winds, especially starting in about December. Red berry juniper in Texas would start to pollinate. Man, we'd get up there, people, you'd start to feel allergies. We'd go all the way into March, because again, you'd have red berry juniper, then you get blueberry juniper, and then you get eastern red cedar all pollinating, and man, that's a problem. And a lot of times it used to be when we get a north wind, it would clean the air out. Well, now Kansas got so much cedar now, you can't, seriously, you don't, when the wind blows from the north, it's cedar, it's pollen coming from Kansas and Nebraska. From the south, you got Texas, Oklahoma. And so again, but you look at human health issues of allergy and asthma issues, most people get asked it starting in about December, going all the way to March. I guarantee you, most people have problems with allergies, and you look at it, cedar pollen. So again, that's a big health issue within that. You look at wildfire issues. Again, volatility of fuel. Granted, cedars can make a great fire break if they're wet. They're not going to burn. Got leaf moisture. The fire will go out when it hits a solid stand of cedar, because there's nothing underneath there to burn. It's too wet. The leaves are too wet that they're not going to burn. Get it dry, droughty conditions, especially like we're in right now, man, it's just cranking big time fire, and you're not going to stop it. And so you're putting people at risk fighting the fire at that risk. Homeowners, landowners are at greater risk because you have greater fire intensities, greater problems that can happen. especially in urban areas that allow that to grow up along those edges and stuff. You know, there's all kinds it doesn't, that issue doesn't, and I think that's what we definitely got to work on. That issue definitely impacts that landowner and actually those around you. Because again, just like you, if you're concentrating and you're working on your ranch to keep it cedar free or to keep it best that we can, but my neighbors aren't doing anything at all, it makes my life difficult, don't it? Because I've still got a seed source. I've still got all that stuff still trying to pound and come in here. So again, we all got to work together to eliminate an issue. But you work on that, you work trying to get that done, and that cedar issue, just keeps growing. But again, so we got to work to pull that away from community. So again, not only does it impact you as an individual, it starts to impact the community, also impact a region, also impact a large region like the whole entire Great Plains. Because again, we've got cedar issues from Texas all the way to North Dakota now, and again, 30 years ago, we didn't, South Dakota and North Dakota would laugh at you and go, yeah, we don't have a lot. Actually, I was in Kansas, 20 plus years ago, and people go, oh, we don't have a cedar problem here anymore. Really? You haven't looked? Because, it's always the same thing. We're on the same piece of ground. We see the same piece of ground year in and year out. And we don't notice those subtle changes, kind of a lot of times it's to us like whenever you're a kid and as you're getting older, you look at people and go, oh, they're not very old. And all of a sudden one day you look at them, it's like, golly, they've really aged. And they didn't age overnight. It's a process. And doing that same thing, that woody plants, invasion didn't happen overnight. And again, we're not going to change it overnight either. We got to get to work on it because it's been years coming, and it's going to be years for us to get it back, but we've got to work on it and get after it.
Yeah, I don't have gray in my beard. It's just like it didn't suddenly show up. It's just been kind of, yeah, I get that.
Yeah,
you look at yourself in the mirror every day.
That's not gray, it's chrome.
Yes, it's just face chrome.
You're chroming up there.
Quick question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite kind of drip torch? Forestry supply or Panama?
Forestry supply. I hate Panama torches.
I go the other way.
Yeah, no, you're from north.
Yeah,
north of that line. You go up that way and get to Nebraska. My buddies in Nebraska, we argue about this all the time. I give them a hard time about it. They're big Panama guys. I've always liked my normal drip torches, forestry suppliers, whatever you want to call them. I can sling fire with them long ways, do a lot of stuff. I just like the way they work. It's a Chevy and Ford question, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Much.
Yeah.
I don't like the 2-piece lid with the spout on it. I like having the spout over on the other side. That's just it's personal preference. I just wanted to know.
It is. I've used them both, and I can use them, but I just like my regular torches on that. So
you get to play with a Terra torch sometimes too, though, don't you?
We've got one. We don't use it a whole lot. Man, the things are just a pain to clean up. Once you use it, you need to use it a lot to make it kind of worthwhile. That I've actually got to burn with heli torches. I've burned with helicopters, and I've used ignition with Dades, ping pong ball machines. I've been involved with some of that. I've used, propane. I've burned with all kinds of different stuff. I've used a fire rake. I remember setting over a half mile of backfire with a fire rake one day, getting grass in the teeth and keeping it lit and just dragging it along, and kind of the old fashioned way of doing that kind of stuff. So
kind of like the natives had to do it.
One I always remember people tell me, oh, we use a tire behind a four-wheeler. We'll soak it in diesel and light the tire off and hook it to a chain and drag it behind a four-wheeler. I've never done that one yet. So
I haven't either. That seems really, really safe.
That sounds redneck as you can get right there.
The other one that I've never done and probably have no desire to do would be like there's guys that would take it a pipe.
Yep.
And tie the back of it up on a four-wheeler and let the other end of it down on the ground and just have a little hole drilled in it.
Yep.
And maybe a little wick. And they're driving around on their four-wheeler with this pipe full of fuel just dripping fire behind them. I like my drip torch. I can put that out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's really interesting is I've helped a lot of people get started burning and trained with that, and a lot of people's never seen a drip torch. They've used it, even just a handheld propane torch, trying to light and do that, and you give them a drip torch, no matter what brand it is, and get them to use it, and they're like, wow, this is really nice to be able to do that and to have that. Here's one for you. Question for you is that I can tell on myself big time. So how many times have you ever been on a fire, get ready to start a fire, and you don't have anything to start the fire with? No matches, no lighter.
That has actually not happened to my group.
Good deal.
Since I've been doing this so long, I used to smoke cigarettes. I just got in the habit of carrying a lighter.
Yeah.
And I haven't smoked in years. There's a Bic lighter in my pocket, and there's probably a half a dozen of them laying around in my office. You never know when you're going to need a Bic lighter.
That's right. I always carry one, but again, early on in my stuff, I would not carry one as often and do that, and you got where people didn't smoke, so nobody's doing that. Yeah, that's the greatest thing. You write a good burn plan, you get everything planned out, the weather's good, you get everybody there, and you get all the equipment there, and you get out to the site, and let's light this fire, and it's like,
Yeah, 50 guys, 10 side by sides, a half a dozen trucks.
Nobody has anything to light the fire with. That's really great. That's embarrassing as all get out. So one time what I had to do, it wasn't like we could run back to somewhere and get something. I took a page of the fire plan, rolled it up back in the day when you actually had cigarette lighters in vehicles that worked, pushed that in, stuck the piece of paper on the lighter, and then fanned it, and I got it to light. And I used my fire plan to light the fire with. So you got to do what you got to do every now and then, whenever, especially when you make stupid mistakes. So
I've never had to take one of my burn plans and light it on fire to start a fire. That's one thing I've never had to do.
Yeah, well, I got you beat on that one.
I'll let you have that one.
There we go.
You had any bad wrecks? Not wrecks. You had any bad getaways, bad escapes?
I've burned, I'm almost at 1,400 burns that I've done in the last 35 years. I've had 3 escape fires, and by escapes, that is fires where I have to call other people to help me put it out. So call the fire department, do that.
It's not out of control until it leaves your property.
Well, even if it does spot over on the other property, I can get it out. That's a spot fire to me. That's that's a spot fire. It's spotted. We were able to suppress it with equipment, people on site, get it done. That's good. Those fires where you got to call for help, it's getting bigger and out of control. More than that, I've had about 3 of those. Nothing. Again, even of those, actually one of them, I called the fire department. We actually had it out by the time the fire department got there. And as soon as the fire department got there, their transmission on their truck went out anyway. And so we had to help them haul it back into town, kind of deal. But the other ones, maybe, it got out, burned about 120 acres over on some neighboring properties and stuff, but no damages, no insurance claims, no anything like that, and all the burns and years that I've been burning and things like that. But I was talking with somebody else, we were talking about spot fires and escapes the other day, actually, on that. And if you burn long enough, things, you're always going to have spot fires. That's part of burning. And it's kind of like riding a horse. If you don't fall off every now and then, you haven't rode enough miles, because things are going to happen. Same thing with burning. You're going to have some spots. Typically you learn when they're going to happen, and you're looking for them. And when it does happen, you're right there on it. And they typically don't get very big and no problems, and things like that. We always talk about, but with escape fires, it typically always seems like it's always a compounding problem that happens. And the ones that I've had are the exact same way. Is the fire you find the fire's out, and then all of a sudden a piece of equipment breaks down. or it
Yeah.
gets stuck on the way there, or they drag the hose and it pulls the nozzle, just all kinds of goofy things, they run over the hose. Had one time, it wasn't an escape, but it was getting close to it. The guy had stretched the hose out and was spraying water down. Next thing you know, I looked over, he'd laid it in a really hot area with a bunch of coals there, burnt the hose in two. And so all of a sudden that piece of equipment was rendered useless pretty much. We had one where, again, the same thing where on the way, one of the vehicles just quit working for all of a sudden it wouldn't work. So that broke down. And then all of a sudden you get there and then you have less water than you think in one of the trucks, and all of a sudden you run out of water, so you got a lot of times it's always that it's these compounding problems that just keep compounding and compounding until it's like, God, I got to have some help here to get something out.
Yeah. I'm not going to say I haven't lost a fire that I've been burned boss on. I'm going to say that we have lost fires, of course. Everybody does. You do it long enough, you're going to lose one. You're going to have to call the volunteers, be embarrassed, feel bad. It sucks having to come. It really sucks having to call the volunteers, come bail you out of a situation.
That's right.
And, we can talk to her blue in the face about how to actually do a burn and what to do burn day on the ground. But I think you and I can agree that 90% of it is days before the burn, sitting in here in the office, looking at the map, making the plan, making your contingencies, identifying, areas in preparation that are weak that you're going to need units at, because when the fire comes here at 11 o'clock, there's going to be enough lift. We need to be 500 yards downwind to catch the spot fire. That's going to happen.
Yep, that's going to happen. That's right. And that's the deal. I burn everything I burn it in my head long before it ever gets burned. I think through it. I've always done that. I picture how it's going to burn. And the other thing I do, and I tell people, because a lot of times, when you go out and you walk or you drive around your burn units, getting ready to, plan it, how you're going to burn it, do whatever. Everybody's always looking inside the burn unit. I actually probably spend more time looking outside my burn unit to what's around it. And that helps me dictate a lot. Because again, if I look out here and say, all right, over here, I've got a neighbor over here that doesn't graze and he's got grass, hip high to elephant out there. It's like, man, I really don't want to send a fire that way, because if there's a spot gets over in there, man, it's going to be hard to ever get that thing out. Or they got an area where they've cut all these cedars and they're just laying everywhere and they haven't done anything with it. And it's like, golly, if it gets in there, it'll take 6 weeks to mop it up if we can ever even get it out. And so I want to send fire if I can send my smoke this way, I want to send it away from that. Or if I got a neighbor that grubs it down to the ground, I'm going to send my fire that way, because if it spots over there, it ain't going anywhere, or, no big deal kind of deal. So I look a lot outside the burn unit as to what's around me, not only for smoke as a big part of it, but also for my fire, to which way I want to send it to make it safer and easier. Also, I'll look at fire breaks that I may have. I may have over here, I can use a county road, so I got a bare ground county road over here on two sides. I really want to send it that way. Traffic's not going to be a problem. Smoke in that way, it's no big deal because it's just a dirt county road. But I got 30 foot of bare ground fire break over here. It'd be a whole lot easier to backfire off of this than it will over here where I've got, I'm going to have to put in a fire break or do something like that, and or have to work off a mowed line and stuff. I'd rather work off of that bare ground road that's already there.
It's 1,000% easier to burn off of a 2-track road than it is to build a fire guard to go down fence lines. And that's one of the things that we really are good about doing here in the Red Hills. I say that, but is, we've had a burn association since 2008, and we really try to promote a lot of burning culture, not just in our area. We're trying to promote other burn associations in the state to get started. But the power in that is, we have a group that, goes and does this a lot. We kind of know each other.
Yeah.
Fire culture Man, fire culture is a tricky one. You know, we talked a little bit about the Flint Hills. They have a very strong fire culture.
Mhm.
And, you know, their burn season is like April 7th to April 15th.
Yeah.
It seems like
Yeah.
you know, 1.5 million acres get burned in that week. And look, I get it. You know, that's the business plan. That's what they need to do to make a living, make their land payments. I get it.
Yeah.
I like, you know, I like looking at the, you know, midsummer, later summer window. It might not always be the most ideal from a grazing planning point of view or
Mhm.
being able to manage stockpiles. But I'm starting to look at that as just another management challenge to overcome and just something else to figure out.
Yeah.
Um, I,
You know, the other thing about like that, like seasonality and burning at different seasons, you know, not only doing that makes a lot of times makes burning simpler. You know, I always tell people, you know, one of my favorite quotes is, you know, burning is not rocket science because I am definitely not a rocket scientist. I am not that smart. And so, but it's simple, it's easier, and I think people are scared of it because they think it's a lot more difficult and it's a lot more problematic. And it's not that difficult as long as you think through. It's just like anything else. The more you're around something, the more you get comfortable with it, the more doing it. That you more that you do it, the more you can do it and you do it safely. But you know, to make it simple. So again, burning stuff in the springtime and then burning into those burned areas in the summer, man, that makes life simple because it's that fire is not going to go across those areas you burned in the spring. There's no old growth to carry it. So you can do that. And then burning stuff in the summer, you go turn around and burn it in the spring. Granted, yeah, you burn it in the summer, there's enough fuel, you know, there's enough grass regrew and things like that. It will burn, but you're dealing with really short statured fuel, simple and easy to put stuff out, you know. So again, you know, build on your burns and do things, make life simple and safer. You know, that's a big part of that too, is how do you make the burns safe, simple, and easy? Because it really shouldn't be a lot of hard work out there. You know, it should be enjoyable. You know, really, in fact, burn is fun. It is fun. And you know, and you can make it, sometimes people make it really difficult when it shouldn't be difficult. But like you said, with the group you burn with, the more you burn with a group, man, the greater it is because everybody knows their job. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do, what they're looking for. Man, it's fun to have a great burn crew to burn with. That is one thing that is so enjoyable is to have good burn crews. You don't worry about anything. You know, if I sent you down the line over here lighting, you know where to go, you know how to light. We're not going to worry about it. You're not going to send, you know, create too big a head fire or anything like that. You know, whatever we need to do, you know, it's going to be done right.
sometimes you put the guy on the torch that doesn't know how to stop, and sometimes you put the guy on the torch that goes really slow and really careful.
It depends on the day, that's for sure.
I spend almost as much time on, let's just say, like line assignments, what crews I'm going to put on what line.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost as critical as like
Oh,
fire
yeah.
guard prep, and the planning for wind directions is having the right team go down the right line to deal with the hazards that they're going to be presented with.
Yep.
You know,
And
there's
that's things I always look at is, again, which side is the most difficult or is the greatest risk? And a lot of times always be on that. I always put myself over there. I want to be, if I'm in charge, I want to be in charge of the bad side. I don't want to have it easy because I want to know what's going on and be in control of doing that. Yeah. And so, and who I put where, that's always a big thought about that. Like I said, there's times to burn whenever you need the slow poke person that don't walk real fast to be lighting because we need to go slow today. And then there's other times, man, we need some speed because we got great conditions. It's perfect. Let's go and get it done. You know, that's
reminds me of one we did a couple of years ago, or my friend on the ranch, my friend Russell Blue runs. It was like we show up and I'm kind of expecting like a 3,700 acre deal.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh no, we've expanded and added on a couple extra units. It's 5,500 acres.
There you go.
Like, okay, what's my piece? And he said, you're going to be east boss and line boss. And here's the map. And I looked at it, I go, dude, there's like 8 miles here we got to cover. And he said, yeah, So I looked at it a little bit more and made some quick crew assignments, and we went and briefed it. And the last thing I said at the brief is, guys, we got 14 miles to get around this monster. Speed is life. Let's go.
Yep.
And I think it's less than 3 hours later, we were around it.
Yeah. You know, and you're probably the same way. I would rather burn a big unit than I have a little one.
Oh yeah. It
It's a
takes
whole
all,
lot
it
more
doesn't matter.
forgiving.
It takes all day.
It's only, yeah, I always tell people, you know, burning's like camping. You know, it don't matter if you go camping for 3 days or 3 weeks, you still got to take the same amount of junk. The only thing you got to bring is more food.
Yeah.
And burning's the same way. It don't matter if you're burning 3 acres or 3,000 acres. It takes the same amount of equipment. You just got to bring more torch fuel. You know, and that's the deal with it, you know. So you might as well. Big burn units are way more forgiving. You know, I spend a lot of time burning a lot of small stuff. You know, and that's what's risky. I'm burning this little bitty chunk inside this big chunk. You know, I remember burning some research plots up in Northwest Oklahoma. We were doing some work on. They were like 7-10 acre research plots. We're in the middle of a 2,000 acre pasture, burning 7 acres in grass and sand sagebrush waist high. And I'm looking around going, yeah, if this thing gets out, we're having fun. You know, and fortunately it didn't. But it's like, holy smokes, you know, I'd rather burn the 2,000 than I had that 7 I had to burn in the middle of it, you know.
Yep. And I was trying to go this direction earlier when I was talking about prescribed fire associations, you know, and back to my comment that, yeah, it's a lot easier. I'd much rather burn off of even just a 2-track road than a fence line. So we have a tendency to put fence lines on our property line. Like, my God, it's got to be right on the line. And a lot of times it's really impractical to try to get down that fence line. And if you try to stay just on your property, you might have to box around some canyons that really, really need fire to get in there just for access. So one of the great things about our burn association is, you know, we have several state prescribed fire coordinators, like funded positions.
Yeah.
Ours is Jess Crockford. I know you know him.
Oh man, Jess is so great.
Like his actual job title escapes me right now, but he goes around and he helps people set up burn associations and write burn plans, and he'll even show up on the day of your fire and run a torch for you. And let me tell you, Jess is a lead igniter.
Life is good.
Yeah, he's on the 8. Yeah, I could go send him to do hard stuff.
I got to burn with Jess back in September. I come up and did a burn training for the NRCS there in Kansas, and we were outside Pretty Prairie over where Dusty Taha lives and that area. And Jess come over and helped us every day that we burned, and they had so much fun working with Jess and doing that. He's one of them ones, you know, exactly right, man. A great crew member. You know, if you send him over there, things are going to get done. They're going to get done right. They're going to get done safe and doing that. It's good to have, you know, good folks like that. But like I said, the burn association part, man, makes it different and makes it great. And like you said, you start, you know, you got those boundaries. And that's what we're always worried about with fire is, you know, that fire getting off of your property, you know. So I always say, you know, fences are the biggest determinant of fire, because we always don't want it to burn through the fence, not because it's not going to damage the fence. It's because we're worried about it getting across that property line.
Yeah.
And if we take away those fences, those property boundaries, fire is able to function across the land like it should. And that's where burn associations, that's where that fire culture, again, that's why the Flint Hills of Kansas, you know, Osage country in Oklahoma, why they burn so much and they're able to do that. There's no boundaries. Fire knows no boundaries up there because everybody burns, expects to burn, and it does that. And that's why, you know, fire can function on that landscape. And that's where, you know, we've lost it because we got these boundaries and we don't want fire to get off of our property on the next. But if we get together with neighbors, form that burn association, start that fire culture, you're right. It's a whole lot easier to burn from this lease road or 2-track road on my place to the county road, lease road, creek, whatever on the neighbors over here. We ain't got to try to put a fire break in this big old canyon and trying to deal with all that. Let's just burn the whole thing out. We can go from point A to point B and life is good.
Be
And
done before lunch.
that's right. And be done, and to be done instead of working all week on this thing and babysitting it and all that, if we just kept it on our place and doing it. And that's the great process of what burn associations should be, is it gets neighbors talking about fire and using fire. Because how many times, when y'all started using fire, you were one of the few folks out there that were burning. And you had the naysayers and the negative people that were neighbors and doing that, but you also had other neighbors going, well, why didn't you let it come across the fence? I'd like to burn my place too. Well, it's like, well, we don't have a plan and we don't have a break. But a lot more than often than not, if neighbors will talk to their neighbor, you got to talk, amazing what communication does. Talk to them and say, hey, I'm planning on burning this. What do you think about that? Well, I'd like to burn too. Okay, let's make a plan and make it simpler. We can go whole road to whole road. Great example of that was this last spring where I live on the section I live on. There's 4 landowners on 4 quarters there. And one of the neighbors called me and said, hey, I'm going to burn today. And I said, oh, okay. And I'll be glad to help. And so we started working. I said, I've talked to all the neighbors. They want to burn. Have you talked to them? No, not really. I said, well, let's call. Then all of a sudden I look up and another neighbor over there had started a fire. And it's like, hey, hold on a minute. Let's all get together and do that. And before you know it, in about 10 minutes, we made a plan and we burnt the whole section. We just went around the roads, wrung it out, and life was good instead of trying to burn this quarter here and this, make life simple, make fire simple, and do that.
Yeah, one of the things that we've had a problem with is and this was decades ago, Dad would burn a piece and the neighbors would be like, no, we don't want to burn with you. We don't want to burn with you. We don't want to burn with you. So Dad would burn a piece. And then 2 or 3 days later, they'd light their pasture and burn through our fence into our fire guard.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So
like, come on, let's do it together. It makes it simpler, it makes it cheaper, and everything else.
So I apologize. I do have to get going this morning. So we're going to have to cut this a little bit short. If folks want to know more about how to start a burn association or some resources, where could they go and where can people find you on social media?
I'm, just John Weir, JOHNWIR, and so on Facebook. I've got, it's just my own personal Facebook, but I post a lot of fire stuff and things that we can do. Also, if you look up Oklahoma State Natural Resource Extension, we've got a great Facebook page there with some great folks that put a lot of good posts out. A lot of them are about fire, but it's all about natural resource, about land management, and things that we can do. Within that, for burn association information, the Oklahoma Prescribed Burn Association, our website, which is ok-pba.org. We have information about starting a burn association. We've got information. We've got actually bylaws, copies of bylaws and different documents that other burn associations have used that are already there that you can look at and use, help to form one. Again, like I said, depending on what state you're in, there's always a lot of people out there that can help with doing that. Like I said, Kansas has got some great folks working in their Kansas Burn Association. The folks up in Nebraska, there's some great stuff. Texas has some great resources and stuff, as well as Oklahoma. So it depends on where you're at. There's resources out there to help with that. We've got a bunch of good fact sheets. If you'll look up Oklahoma State Extension, it'll take you to the Oklahoma State Cooperative Extension page, and then you can do a search on fact sheets. Just type in fire, and we've got all of our different fire fact sheets and stuff that we worked on. We got a fact sheet about starting a burn association, even within that, but also other great fact sheets about all kinds of different stuff about growing season fire, fire equipment, fire planning, things like that. So doing that. So there's a lot of information out there and about. So.
Very cool. Very cool. I'll make sure I get as much of that stuff crammed into the show notes as I can. Yep. And I don't even think we scratched the surface today of talking about fire.
Yeah, no, you never can. So we need to do this again. Give me a holler. Sometime we'll do it again when you get a chance. So
for sure. Well, I really appreciate your time today, John, and have Have a great week, and rest of y'all,
Yep.
y'all have a great
Brian,
week.
stay good. Tell your dad hi, and y'all take care.
Will do, sir. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.